inspired by the life. When The Meek Shall Inherit completed its spectacularly successful third season, the Encore network began searching for the next big thing. Under the leadership of its new and dynamic young president, Casey Lasko, the network soon began to air what would later be sold in box sets as the Crusader Queens Trilogy, 3 series that chronicled the lives, liaisons, and rivalries of the women who ran the day-to-day operations of the kingdoms of Europe while their men were off in the Holy Land fighting the Saracen. All 39 episodes included the credit "inspired by the stories of Damien de Savoia Underwood," a name that by this point was a registered trademark of Casimir Lasko Enterprises. The show quickly became a camp classic, featuring frequent shots of handsome stable boys emerging nude from royal beds, lesbian relationships both tender and manipulative, murders committed during the moment of orgasm, and the occasional episode of soft-focus bestiality. The excoriating commentary of anyone seriously interested in medieval history, whether professional or amateur, did not trouble Casey in the least. In fact, he monitored the hashtag Crusader Queens Fail with pleasure and delight. Casey did, however, take decisive action when the audience of the third season finale, despite robust raw numbers, skewed alarmingly female over 40. Without hesitation, Casey fired 2 vice presidents and their teams, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by several key advertising partners. That evening, Casey went home and opened the secure room where he kept the notebooks of Victor Damiani. 7 years earlier, Casey had acquired the rights to Damiani's entire oeuvre, whatever it might be, by visiting Victor's aged mother in Skokie. He did not correct her when she assumed that he was an old friend of her son, and by writing her a personal check in the exact amount that she still owed for the funeral expenses. All he wanted, in exchange, was her signature on a legal document, an assignment of copyright. Casey told her that it was what Victor would have wanted, that his own creations should pay for his final bills. Mrs. Damiani thought Casey was a fool to think Victor's writings had any value, but she took the check and signed the contract. Casey then volunteered to clean out Victor's apartment in Bloomington. Mrs. Damiani was more than happy to give him permission. Casey rented a van and drove back to Bloomington, to the studio apartment where Victor had passed the final months of his life, watching cable TV, eating cheap frozen pizzas, and drinking sugary beverages, all the while writing obsessively, until the complications of untreated diabetes brought all activity to an end. The apartment had been sealed for more than a month and stank. Casey opened a window, and as the wintry air flowed in, he began to fill bankers' boxes and take them out to the van. He took the typewriter, the laptop, the spiral notebooks, the legal pads, the stacks of typed papers, the piles of loose handwritten pages, the CDs, the DVDs, the floppy disks, and every book he could find. Then he paid the building manager a few $100s to throw out the rest of the junk, terminate the lease, and, most important, stop bothering Mrs. Damiani. When Casey flew back to L.A., the van's contents, the literary estate of Victor Damiani, had been placed in a storage locker near the Indianapolis airport, and Casey's carry-on bag was bulging with Victor's notes on the meek shall inherit, an intellectual property now owned by Casey Lasko, all rights reserved. Of course, Casey was more than willing to assign the production rights to the Encore network on very favorable terms. After all, that was his job. He had already taken out an advance on his credit card to cover the check to Mrs. Damiani. Everything else could go on his expense report. 7 years later, in Casey's locked and temperature-controlled room, a curated selection of Victor Damiani's most important notebooks and typescripts were arranged on archival shelving like museum artifacts, with a degree of neatness and care they had never known during the life of their author. Casey had no difficulty finding the 3 notebooks and 2 typewritten essays that he was looking for. The moment has arrived, he thought, to tell the world how Damien de Savoya Underwood got his middle name. He kissed one of the notebooks. "This one," Casey whispered, "will be inspired by your life."